Thanks for joining us here at Into the Weeds. We've got a lot of stuff going on, a lot of stuff to talk about. We've been into the tariff stuff. I think we're going to put that on the back shelf for today. I think the two big things that are happening right now are obviously the war between Israel and Iran that just started, and then also the ongoing immigration conversation. We can start with either one, but I feel like we should at least touch on both of them today, since this conflict just began overnight, or last night, and I feel like a lot of people are going to be talking about that. But where do you want to start, Phil?
Let's get the attack on Iran and then their response.
Mm,
Let's get that out of the way because it's like it's sort of the same problem that we're having with the tariffs. We were going to continue with the tariffs on this episode, but in the intervening few days, so much has happened.
right.
By the way, part of what happened is I had grading I had to do, so I couldn't do anything, and then life got in the way. So um, there what's going on in Israel and in Iran and in the region is going to unfold. So it's hard to know, for me at least, it's hard to know what to say because information is still coming in.
Sure.
I
Sure.
think I think one of the things that's amazing is the from the reports that I heard, the incredible precision of the Israeli attack
Mm,
and the effectiveness of it. Apparently, again, some of this is unsubstantiated. So if it turns out not to be true, I'll correct it. But apparently, um, Mossad has the Israeli sort of version of the CIA. They have Iranian nationals situated in Iran, and
mm,
they're participating in these attacks because they're hitting individual leaders. They know where they are,
right.
and they're launching these attacks. They're hitting precision targets. It's just amazing what they've got done. And Iran is a really big country and presumably a powerful country. Israel's this little tiny country, um, but like militarily, it's like no contest.
Right.
They,
Right.
they, they
It's
are so overmatched.
right, and
It's over.
that's largely because they're using American technology, right? The funny thing is actually that both Iran and Israel are using American technology, but Israel's technology is 5 years old, whereas Iran's technology is 30 years old, right? They're
Right.
flying old, F-14s,
No, I'm not.
F-16s.
I'm going to chalk it up to something more than just U.S. technology. We give our technology to a lot of people.
And
Um,
no doubt, there's no doubt that Iran gets missiles from Russia and launch
right.
platforms from China. There's no doubt.
It's their ability to their intelligence is just amazing.
Right.
Which is what makes October 7th such a strange like aberration. How they
It really is. And it's interesting that you bring that up, because I was had that same exact conversation earlier today. Their Mossad is the envy of the world as far as intelligence is concerned, right? They really are an amazing intelligence organization. So how could you miss something so brazen as October 7th, right? Um, and obviously anything that I would say on that matter is speculation, but it makes that attack even more surprising. But what's happened so far, I am in agreement with you. The reporting that I have seen is that Israel has precision targeted military leadership. I heard a little bit from Jennifer Griffin, who is the foreign correspondent on, or the Pentagon correspondent on Fox News. And
great.
even if you don't like Fox News, Jennifer Griffin is pretty amazing. She's a really,
Yeah,
really cool reporter.
absolutely, 100%. One of the best. One of the
So
absolute best.
she talked a little bit about, I don't know if you caught it or not. She talked a little bit about, apparently she got some details on one of the operations that they ran. One of the biggest problems that Israel knew they were going to have in this attack was the Iranian Air Force. obviously, right? And so apparently there was an operation that they ran where they got the leadership of the Air Force all in one place for a meeting using, their intelligence assets, and had them all in the same building, and then hit the building, right? So the apparently nine, again, this is all new stuff. Nine of the 13 Air Force commanders of the Iranian Air Force are toast, right?
Right.
So that's going to certainly dull the air response, and that is how Israel is getting all of this done, is with air superiority. There were some some pretty devastating missile hits that came through that hit Tel Aviv. Thankfully, the population was underground. Also, I am with you in noticing that Israel did not target any civilian leaders. There were no parliamentary leaders that were targeted. The Ayatollah, the president, those people were not targeted. They were strictly military leaders and nuclear sites. So a lot of restraint for Israel. They could have done a lot worse. And Iran in response is openly targeting population centers, which is a surprise to no one, right?
Right.
Um,
Absolutely.
I think that I understand the argument, the Gaza argument, and the Palestinian argument. I get that. But the
Which
argument,
argument are you talking about?
which is that there is, the way that Israel has behaved towards the Gazans in a lot of ways is very concerning, very troubling. I get that there are a lot of people that don't like the way the Palestinians have been treated, and that's an ongoing conversation. But I do think that this is a much different kind of conflict.
Right,
Uh,
and that's the thing. It is a different conflict. Iran is a huge country, spread out, and so the attacks were spread out. Gaza is very concentrated.
right.
Um, but I was talking to somebody else about this. If you showed somebody the attack on Iran that happened yesterday, and then you showed them the what's happened in Gaza,
Hmm.
and you said, were these conducted by the same country? They say, well, of course not. This one is incredibly precise, very detailed, very accurate. This one, civilians are being decimated, right? It doesn't look anything like that. And that's a stark contrast, because it's like, how are they able to get such good information about Iran, which isn't like on the other side of the world, but it's not right next door. And yet in Gaza, that
I think that one of the reasons
so
is
it is. I think it just the contrast is shocking.
it is, and I don't disagree. I think that a big part of it is that there are a lot of people in Iran, fairly high up, my understanding, who would really like to see things change. They really do understand that the Ayatollah and the mullahs have kept Iran under a rock as far as the rest of the world is concerned, and they would like to see some major leadership change. And I think that those are the people who are working with Israel. And so when Netanyahu came out with his announcement earlier today, I don't know if you saw it or not, where he basically said, "Look, we're opening the path for you, the Iranian people who want freedom, to take your country back." And I'm hoping that I'm optimistic, in the sense that we did see some activity of the Iranian rebels, the people who wanted to overthrow the government back in 2009 when Obama was first in office. There were some green shoots of a meaningful rebellion that was happening in that nation. And so I think that a lot of that got pushed underground, but now there's a real opportunity that that could take root. And man, what a different world it would be, if Iran was to sort of not necessarily ally with Israel or ally with the United States, but just stop being a shitbird,
Right?
right?
If they just
Stop,
stop
just stop,
sponsoring,
stop being
stop
assholes. Stop
sponsoring
sponsoring
Hezbollah, right?
Hezbollah and Hamas. Stop telling the rest of the world that you're gonna wipe Israel off the map. Stop. Stop rattling your saber. Just like get your economy back on track. You know, provide better services for your people. Get your education system going, and just join the 21st century. Right. That's basically my hope for Iran. Uh, and the unwillingness of this Iranian administration to engage in meaningful talks about, you know, preventing the creation of a nuclear weapon is, I think they signed their own death warrant, and as far as that's concerned, because Israel's, you're not going to let people who say they want to use a nuclear weapon against you. If you have the capability of preventing them from getting that nuclear weapon, you're going to do that, right? So anyway, but I'm optimistic. Overall, I'm optimistic. What about you?
I just know that there's something called the rally around the flag effect, that people have a tendency to rally around their country's leadership
Sure.
when
Yeah.
they're attacked. And so,
Right.
um, whatever the whatever some of the elites in Iran believe, I wonder that sometimes what happens is when the country's attacked, they feel they
It
feel there's a
galvanizes
knee
the
jerk reaction to sort of
sure.
support. So I don't think I'm as optimistic as you are that there's going to be something's going to rise up. This is a brutal regime, and I don't expect that to change. More likely than not, they'll double down. So we'll just have to see. So
Maybe.
there's
And
not. I think the point here for anybody listening is we have no idea what the hell's going on.
yeah.
There we go. That's our
Right?
contribution to the discourse here. We don't know.
We can hope, and that's about all we can do, right?
Right.
Okay, well then let's shift gears. Let's talk about the ongoing immigration conversation. This is something that I know you and I we've had disagreements on in the past. I expect that we're going to continue to have disagreements today, and but I'm going to let you kick it off because I know you've got some stuff that you want to talk about. So hit it up.
Well, just in general, I mean, I am sickened by what's going on, and the immigration thing, and the use of the military as props, as far as I'm concerned. Those two things happening together are it. I heard actually Senator Murkowski say this. Um, this was after it was like so a whole bunch of things are going on. This was after Senator Padilla was wrestled to the ground by the FBI and handcuffed, and she said, "This is not the country I know." I agree with her. For those of you who don't know, Lisa Murkowski is a Republican senator from um, Alaska. So there's a bunch of things going on. I think to me, Donald Trump, and Jubal probably disagrees with it, Donald Trump campaigned on going after the worst of the worst. That is clearly not what's going on. What's been reported in various outlets is that Stephen Miller, who is sort of one of Donald Trump's right hand man, basically told DHS, told ICE, he wants to see 3,000 arrests a day. He had a number. I don't know how he arrived at that number. I don't know if there was a careful analysis done to get to that number, or if he's just making shit up. But in order to get 3,000 people a day, you have to go after what people are calling the low hanging fruit. And so that's why ICE is pulling into Home Depots. That's why they're going into agriculture areas, going after farm workers. That's why they're going into car washes. That's why they're going into apparel factories. It is just, to me, it is sickening. So seeing what they're doing, seeing them masked, which I find incredibly problematic, hearing what's happening in the Hispanic community, um, and how people are feeling, I think everybody agrees, almost everybody agrees, I guess, that um, if you're going to deport criminals, fine, get rid of them. But going after hardworking people who are here in the country illegally, there's no question about that. They're here in the country illegally. Although when you do these sort of slapdash tactics, you invariably scoop up American citizens. I don't know why anybody is okay with this. It is sickening to me. I'll tell everybody, Jubal knows this, in a email exchange before. Um, I said I wasn't sure I wanted to record today because I am so sickened by what's happening. I'm so sickened by what's happening. This is not the country that I know and love. And then on top of that, I see Donald Trump going ahead and federalizing the National Guard. Just so people, in case people don't know this, the way it typically works is if law enforcement needs additional help, the National Guard can come in. What they typically do is they ask the governor, because the National Guard is a state militia, they ask the governor for help. What President Trump did was federalize them. He took control of them and ordered them to LA. The chief of police in Los Angeles said, we don't need their help. We're inflaming the situation. And that now, fortunately, a judge went ahead and ruled that the laws that President Trump invoked to justify the mobilization of the National Guard, he says they're unconstitutional. They can't be done. Now it's on hold right now. Went up to the Court of Appeals. It's on hold. They're going to hold hearings on this. So I see him. To me, it's Donald Trump sort of using the military as a prop. Tomorrow we're going to have the parade in ostensibly in honor of the military, the army. Just happens to fall on Donald Trump's birthday. We're going to have tanks and military assets rolling through the streets of Washington, D.C., like we're fucking North Korea or Russia. It's sickening to me. Um, there's so much going on. Jubal and I started this whole thing with a series on authoritarianism, right? And what would be the signs um, that we're becoming more authoritarian? We had a 4-year-old American citizen being treated for cancer deported. We had a U.S. senator from the largest state in the country wrestled to the ground by the FBI because he apparently interrupted Secretary Noem, right? Everybody in between those two groups, I think everybody is vulnerable. Everybody is vulnerable. If
Hmm.
you dare to oppose what Donald Trump is doing. So I have resisted and will continue to resist, saying that we're in a constitutional crisis. I know a lot of people disagree with me. They say, no, Phil, we're here. I don't know that we're here yet, but we're closer than I ever imagined this country becoming. And it's sickening to me. It's sickening to me. I'm
So
glad. Go ahead.
let me respond. Let me start by responding to the 4-year-old that was deported. Do you want to share the details of that? Why that child was deported?
No, I don't care.
Okay.
I don't
So
care what the
what happened was
details are.
her mother was deported because her mother was
Right,
not a citizen. She is not a citizen, right? The
right.
4-year-old is not a citizen.
She's a criminal, right?
No, I don't
Okay,
think
she's
so.
not a criminal.
Okay.
So we couldn't just let
We'll
her
get to
stay in
that.
the country while her child was treated for cancer in a
Mhm.
country that's going to have much better medical services. What
100%.
is the urgency of getting rid of her? What is
I
the
don't know.
urgency? Her kid
I
is
don't
being treated for fucking cancer.
I get that you're upset. I get that you're upset. But
It's not just that I'm so upset, Jubal. It's fucking sickening.
okay.
It's fucking sickening.
Let's go to Padilla then, right? Senator Padilla. What were the details of that of what happened?
Secretary Noem was holding a press conference
Hmm.
in a federal building. He was waiting for a meeting that was going to happen later on, a briefing by some other military people. He found out that she was holding the press conference, so he went into that room. He was escorted in actually by somebody from the National Guard and the FBI. He sat and listened to her for a while. And at one point, she said something that he found incredibly offensive. I did too. It didn't get reported nearly as much as it should have been.
Hmm.
She talked about having to, these were her words, liberate California from its political leaders, who she described as socialists.
Hmm.
So liberate. And as a senator, the senior senator from California, he interrupted her. He did.
Mhm.
He wanted to ask a question. I voted for that guy. I'm glad he did. I thought what she said was sickening.
So they wrestled him to the ground because he interrupted her?
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
So what I would encourage everyone to do is to find the video footage and see for yourself.
Absolutely.
What I saw was Padilla barged into the room,
He did not. That's
started
just false,
started
Jubal.
he
I can't let that go.
he is
That's
moving
just,
he's moving towards the stage, right?
he's moving. He is moving towards her.
He's
Don't say
he's
he wait. Don't say he barged into the room. He was escorted into the
okay.
room by somebody from the National Guard and the FBI.
Okay.
He did not barge into the room. That's just false. He sat there and he listened to her talk for quite a while
Okay.
and didn't say anything, which he made her comment about liberating California
So then he
from its
got up
leaders.
from his
Yep.
from his seat where he was sitting peacefully.
No, no, he
Uh
was standing in the back of the room.
standing in the back of the room. Okay. And then he began to move towards the stage, shouting questions, right?
Correct.
Interrupting Christy Nome, moving towards her.
Mhm.
Uh, is if anybody else now he was not wearing also you should let people know he was wearing regular clothes. He was not wearing a suit with like a senator pin or anything like that. He was just
He
wearing
identified himself as a senator from California.
okay, and he was moving towards the stage. Now I don't I
He was
can't
near her in any way.
I
If you
just want
look
to
at the video, he was nowhere
let
near
me
her,
just I just
Jubal.
want to ask you a
This
question.
is where you do this sort of cult speak that pisses me off so much.
Hmm.
That he was nowhere near her. She didn't feel threatened. Here's how any other secretary would respond when they saw FBI going after a U.S. senator.
Hmm.
They would have said, "Whoa, whoa, whoa! You guys, hang on. That's Senator Padilla. Let him go. Let him go."
Okay.
Any other person would do that, but she's performing for Donald Trump.
Hmm.
And so she doesn't say a word. So my two options for her, either she didn't recognize him, she's testified before him multiple times,
Hmm.
or she saw him and she didn't fucking care. And so a US senator being wrestled to the ground, wasn't arrested. I know some people were reporting he was arrested. He wasn't arrested. He wasn't detained. He was wrestled to the
No,
ground.
in fact he had a
This
meeting with
is
her
not the
10
way it
minutes later.
works in this country. As a matter of fact, according to her, I haven't heard him say anything about it. After the event happened, Secretary Nome and Padilla had like a 15-minute conversation after the whole thing happened. So
Right.
I don't, I she said that. I haven't heard him say anything or be asked about it yet. So I'll wait to see whether or not that actually happened. If that did happen, that's a good thing. It should have happened on camera.
Sure.
But
Sure. That'd be great.
and it should have, and he never should have been taken down.
Here's
The
my thing.
fact that
Look,
you're already making excuses for a U.S. senator being tackled to the ground by the FBI is just fucking sickening.
here's the deal, Phil. I am all in favor of senators and congresspeople and whoever being treated exactly the same way as everybody else. If you are interrupting a presentation by a secretary, you are moving towards the stage, you're shouting questions, and you're not responding to the commands of law enforcement people that are next to you, and you can watch the video and you can see that that's what he was doing. I expect you to be wrestled to the ground. That's what I expect. If anybody else had done that, if any regular person off the street had
He
started moving towards
wasn't
the stage,
a
just hang on.
regular
Let me
person
talk.
off the street.
It doesn't matter. He wasn't, look, I couldn't have picked him out of a lineup before this happened. I could have known,
Secretary Nome should have been able to.
fine.
They escorted him into
If
the
you said,
room.
he was, look, all I'm saying is, if you're moving towards the stage, you're not listening to what law enforcement is telling you, you're shouting questions, you're interrupting. Anybody else off the
He
street
should
would
be
have been
wrestled to
wrestled
the
to the ground.
ground and
Anybody else
handcuffed.
in the world
Absolutely. And
had done
that's your
that,
idea. And I
they would have
want
been
you to
wrestled to the
remember
ground.
that later on, Jubal. I want you to remember that. I want you to think about the Tea Party protests. I want you to think about the way people interrupt each other in Congress when they're there.
Okay.
They should be sending the sergeant of arms to wrestle people to the ground and handcuff them.
I think it's a little bit different situation. Here's the deal. Nobody's above
Did
the
you get
law.
from Secretary Nome saying that she felt she was threatened in any way?
Hang on, hang on. Nobody's above the law. if you're behaving in a way that is potentially threatening
Okay,
to
so let's cut to the chase. You were okay with the way he was treated.
no, I'm not
Okay.
okay with it, but I do think it was
They
I do think it was
wrestled him to the ground and handcuffed him. They
oh
didn't just
Phil.
usher him out of the room, Jubal. If you saw the video,
Yeah,
they
they
didn't just
handcuffed him.
usher him out of the room. They ushered him out of the
Mhm.
room, and then they put him on the ground, and then they handcuffed him. He was
Mhm.
wearing a shirt that said United States Senate. He had identified himself as a
Okay.
U.S. Senator.
All right.
But this is what's going on in this administration.
You don't
This
think
is
that
what's going on.
maybe, you don't think maybe, possibly, that it was a little bit performative on his side?
Oh no, there's no question. I mean, did he want to get
He
attention? Did he
that
want
he
to ask
wanted
her
to he
questions?
wanted to interrupt, he wanted
Absolutely,
to create
absolutely.
a tumultuous moment. I think that that's what he
I don't think he
intended.
wanted. I don't know that he wanted a tumultuous moment. I suppose he would have loved to have an interaction with Secretary No.
At
I thought
interrupting
he.
her
I
as
think
she's
he
giving a
would.
speech to a room full of people?
I think what he was hoping she was giving a press conference. He's a U.S.
Okay.
senator.
Is
He
is
was
that an
allowed in the room,
is that
Jubal.
yeah, but he
The
wasn't
security
allowed
people allowed him in the room,
Bill,
and
he
he was
wasn't
exercising his free speech. He was going to ask her a question. She could have.
okay.
Here's what any other normal administration would have done.
All right.
They would have let
I
him, and they would have let him ask the question. She would have said, "Senator, I'll be happy to meet with you to discuss this later on."
sure.
Right? And
I
that's how
don't
normal. That's how normal non-authoritarian people act.
I think
That's
that
not what Secretary Noem did, and you're okay with that.
I think that anybody who is attempting to bull rush a stage and shouting questions and
You guys watch the
interrupting,
video.
yeah,
Watch the
watch the
video.
video, make
Oh,
up for your
and just remember the words "bull rush the stage."
just
This is how bad it is right now.
okay. Check it out for yourself.
Go ahead,
Uh,
check it out.
it's
Leave some
and
comments if you want. Tell me if you saw anybody bull
100%.
rush the stage. Listen to the interview with Secretary Padilla
Sure.
and see how he got into the room. Jubal
Mhm.
said you can watch the tape. Jubal said that he rushed into the room.
Ask
He did
yourself
not.
if
He did not. Just go ahead and listen to what Padilla said. He was
right,
interviewed by Jacob Soboroff. Go interview. Hear what he has to say.
right. So you can believe that he was utterly blameless, or you can believe that he was creating a whatever you want to call it, an event that was somewhat theatrical to draw attention to whatever his issue was. And I think he was successful in doing that. So he wasn't harmed, and he's fine. And I think
It
it's
was
a tempest in a
disgraceful.
teapot.
It
I
was fucking
I think it
disgraceful.
was disgraceful that he lacked the decorum that you would expect a senator to have. I think he should have known better than to shout questions in the middle of a press briefing that he was not part of,
That's worthy of being
and
tactically
an
correct.
attempt to
A
shove his
U.S.
way to the
senator,
stage.
when she's talking about liberating California from its leaders, liberating California from its leaders. That's why the military had to be sent there to liberate
Then
California
you've got to
from leaders.
disagree,
I voted
right?
for this guy. I'm glad he was there.
Okay.
If he was there for a while, according to what he said, he was there for a while. When she said that, it was like, fuck that. I don't blame him. I would have done the same thing. I would have done the same thing.
All right.
But you guys, this is
Mm.
where we are in America. Just so you know, this is where we are in America. A whole bunch of very intelligent people, of which Jubal is definitely one, look at this stuff and they think it's okay.
I
So
never said it was okay.
every one of you who sat home and didn't vote, you
Look.
contributed to this.
I
You
think
contributed to this.
I don't. I don't think I don't think that this was a terrifying event. I think this was a senator who was trying to get attention and got attention. That's what this was,
It
right?
was a sickening event.
I think that he's just as much to blame for what happened as Christy Nome.
Absolutely, absolutely not.
Okay,
Absolutely not. And I've never
watch
seen that. I've never seen anything like that.
watch for yourself. If they had drug him out of his house in handcuffs in the middle of the night, that's one thing.
If they were just trying to
Uh,
get him out of the room, if they were just trying to get him out of the room, they would have got him out of the room. They would have said,
mhm.
Senator, you're going to have to stay out. They would have closed the doors.
I think they treated
That
him
wasn't
exactly the
enough.
way.
They
They would have
walked him
treated.
around the corner. They told
Mhm.
him to get on his hands and knees, and they handcuffed him.
Okay.
And they knew the cameras were running because that was the goal. That was the point.
Mm.
And she's performing, and they're performing it for Donald Trump.
Hmm.
That's what's going on here.
And is he
And
performing?
people like Jubal, again, smart, good guy, told you before, love the guy. People are okay with this.
Is it
People are
possible that
okay.
Padilla is performing?
People are okay, but he's not using the force
Okay.
of the federal government. He's
Mm.
not using law enforcement to go ahead and uh, go after people who oppose him or challenge him. He's Donald Trump, and his minions are using the federal law enforcement to silence their political opponents,
Is that what was
to
going on
try
in
and stop.
LA? That the
Pardon me?
National Guard was silencing their political opponents in LA? Is that what was going
No,
on?
I think they were sent there as political props.
Ah,
And
but
and the
they
and the ju-
but
and
they didn't.
the judge who ruled on the case, Judge Breyer,
Mhm,
his ruling was a devastating ruling.
mhm.
He basically, it was interesting because he actually did what conservative jurists typically do. He did a textual analysis of the provisions that Donald Trump and Secretary Hegseth relied on to justify sending the National Guard, and said, this is wrong.
So this isn't the first
Justified
time.
it on,
This isn't the
justified.
first time that a president has sent the National Guard to a scene.
Let me tell you, no, 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 no. This is the last time a president, the last two times that a president has sent in the National Guard
Hmm.
without the approval of the governor was in the 1960s.
Hmm.
And it was to enforce and protect African Americans. So one of them was after the
Integrate school, right? School
Brown versus
integration.
Board of Education, and
Hmm.
the other time was when there was going to be a march, I think in Selma or Montgomery, and so the National Guard was sent there to go ahead and protect the protesters. Both times done in the 1960s against the wishes of the government, of
Hmm.
the state government, because the 10th Amendment, because the Constitution reserved policing power when it comes to state laws to the police. But only people who care about the Constitution know about that. Donald Trump doesn't. And so he invoked laws. He was shot down by the judge. The Ninth Circuit has put it on hold. I think it'll be upheld, and it will go ahead, and control of the National Guard will be returned back to Governor Newsom.
Okay, so I just want to make sure everybody
Mhm.
understands that what Trump did in LA was the same thing that JFK did after Brown v. Board, right?
Well, actually, it was Eisenhower. But
Oh no,
no,
you're right.
it's
You're
no, no,
right.
no. It's not the same thing.
He sent in
He
the
was
National
doing
Guard.
because the governor, Eisenhower was enforcing a Supreme Court ruling.
Hmm.
By the way, a Supreme Court ruling that he didn't agree with.
Hmm.
He didn't agree with Brown versus Board of Education. He didn't like the idea of the courts determining for everybody. He was a conservative. He didn't like the idea of the courts doing that.
But he
He was in,
nationalized
he
the
was
state guard.
enforcing the law.
Hmm.
He was enforcing the decisions of the courts, even though he disagreed with the decisions of the
Hmm.
courts. Donald Trump didn't consult with Gavin Newsom. He didn't consult with Mayor Bass. He didn't consult with Chief McDonald. He just sent them in.
Hmm.
2,000 people. And now it's 4,000 people using a law that clearly he violated,
Hmm.
right? And I applaud Governor Newsom for challenging it. I applaud the judge for going ahead and making such a clear ruling. I understand why the Circuit Court of Appeals put it on hold. It's a very liberal court, the Ninth Circuit, but they stayed the decision. And so I think they're going to be hearing cases tomorrow. I have no doubt they're going to come to the same conclusion.
Hmm.
And then it'll go up to the Supreme Court. We'll have to see what the Supreme Court does. But yes, don't equate what Donald Trump did with
So you're
what
saying your
Eisenhower did.
your opinion is that he sent the National Guard in to not to
As
stop the riots, but just
they
to
Jubal, they aren't even allowed to engage the rioters.
right.
One, they don't have the training, so it's incredibly unfair. What they doing that to the National Guard. They're
Hmm.
not trained to do riot control. That's what the
Hmm.
police are trained to do. McDonald made it clear he didn't need them to be there. There was no coordination whatsoever. McDonald said, if I need additional resources, first thing he would do is he would contact the sheriff department, and he could pull in other law enforcement. They're trained in
Hmm.
crowd control. But bringing the National Guard in there for something that they're not trained to do, that's not their mission. They're soldiers. They're there for like disaster relief, like after the fires they were here. I
Hmm.
remember when I lived in Northridge after the Northridge earthquake, they were here helping with the recovery efforts. That's what they did. Bringing the Marines in here is even worse.
Well, the Marines haven't been deployed, but the National Guard was
No,
deployed.
they're on their way.
Okay.
700 Marines are being. You guys, here's the thing: the Marines, they're trained to kill. That's
Hmm.
what their whole job is. Their job is not to de-escalate. They escalate.
Hmm.
I mean, we need them like that. That's what they do. They're not. That's not what their training is. And so
So the National Guard,
they,
I just want to make clear that the National Guard was deployed around federal buildings.
they were there. They are only there to protect property
Right.
and for foreign agents like the Foreign Protective Service, ICE,
Hmm.
federal, like so they can
So
help ICE.
they're not posted up on street corners with machine guns
No, no, no. They're not even
arresting
allowed to.
people,
They're not even
right?
allowed to engage the protesters.
Right.
They were not
They
there.
basically have a bunch
They
of
were
riot
not there.
shields
Yeah, they
lined
were
up.
not there for the protesters. They
Right.
did nothing with the protesters whatsoever. They're there to protect property and protect other federal agencies. That's it.
Right.
That's all they do. That's all they're trained to do.
Right. So do you consider that an escalation? I mean, is that
It's incredibly provocative. Absolutely.
okay? So I
People were already upset with what was happening with ICE. People were already upset with
mhm.
ICE going into car washes
A-
and Home
and
Depots and
that's why
Beatles and apparel offices,
that's
right?
what
They
the
were
protest
already not.
was, right? The protest was against ICE. There were threats made
Absolutely.
over social media channels that they were going to attack the federal building, and Trump sent in National Guardsmen with riot shields to surround the building and
If
keep them
there was
from.
help needed, the appropriate thing to do
Mhm.
would have been to contact Governor Newsom and
Mhm.
say, "You're, I, you know, you need our help." Keep in mind, Governor Newsom, if he
Mhm.
wanted to, and if he thought it was necessary, he could have mobilized the National Guard, where
Mhm.
they're under his command. Unless Trump federalizes them, they are under his command. They are a state militia, right?
Mhm.
So it's not like the National Guard wasn't available. You know
Sure.
what Governor Newsom did? Governor Newsom was in communication with Mayor Bass and
Mhm.
communication with law enforcement in Los Angeles, and he was making his decisions based on their recommendations.
Okay. So what we know happened was there were a bunch of police that were attacked, right? A bunch of cop cars that were smashed up with like rocks and
Mhm.
signs and stuff.
Right?
A bunch of businesses burned down.
Well, actually, I
Cars.
don't think there was one. I believe there was one store looted. I don't think there were any businesses burned down.
Okay.
Everybody should know, you guys. I live here in Los Angeles. The
Hmm.
idea that the city
How
is,
many cars were on fire?
I think something like 6 Waymo cars were on
Mm.
fire.
Uh,
Yeah.
so if it's more than six cars that are on fire, then it's a problem.
No, no, no. I don't think it's a number of cars that whether it's a problem. What I'm going to do, and the way I typically think about this, is I'm going to let law enforcement make the determination about what's necessary.
Sure.
So Chief McDonald, he's a professional.
Hmm.
He understands what needs to be done. I was watching some of the coverage and the police tactics and the things they do to disperse crowds. If you listen to Chief McDonald, he talked in detail about the way they respond to things. So
Okay. I mean,
he didn't
how
ask
many
for.
protesters got shot with rubber bullets? Do you have any idea?
I don't know what the numbers were. I don't know. I don't know how many people were
How
shot.
many people were arrested for throwing Molotovs?
Um, I, 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 I'm pulling this out of thin air. I think the last thing I heard was that there had been a total of 400 people arrested.
Hmm.
I think that was a number that had been arrested. But what McDonald said was that they have a lot of this on camera.
Mhm.
And so, in the same way that people went after the January 6th rioters based on film that they had recorded during the attack on the Capitol building, when the riots end, um, that won't be the end of the investigation. So I
Mm,
expect
good.
that there'll be more arrests.
Good. I hope that there is. So I think that we can agree, you and I,
But
that
here's one thing I do want to point out: every
sure.
single Democratic leader condemned the rioters.
Mhm.
Every single one of them condemned the rioters.
Well, there's a difference between
And
there's a difference between condemning
Donald Trump,
violence.
Donald Trump pardoned the rioters. The
Mhm.
people who attacked the police, he pardoned them, right? Talk about condoning violence.
Mhm.
That is the difference. Mayor Bass, McConnell is not really a Democrat or Republican. He's a chief of police. Gavin Newsom, every Adam Schiff, Senator Padilla, every
Mhm.
single one of them condemned the riots unequivocally. Every one of them said attacking law enforcement is unacceptable.
Mhm.
Donald Trump pardoned those very same people.
See, here's the thing. There's a difference between saying that you don't condone the violence or that you're against the violence, and then not doing as much as you can to prevent the violence, right?
What do you
Uh,
mean not doing? Why do you say not doing as much as they can?
I think that if
Who
they
should
had
they who should they rely on to make the determination about what resources are needed? Donald
that's a
Trump?
that's a great
Donald Trump?
question.
Well, let me ask you. I'm asking you.
Hmm.
There's problem happening in Los Angeles.
Hmm.
Who do you want making the decisions? Who do you think? Or let's forget Los Angeles. We're talking about Austin, or we're talking about Tallahassee.
Hmm.
There's unrest. Who do you want to be making the decisions about how to deal with it? The federal government, who doesn't know what's going on, the federal government, not in consultation with local law enforcement, but just of their own volition. Do you want
Hmm.
the federal government making the decision, or do you want local law enforcement
But
who know what's
according
happening on the ground? Who do you want making those decisions?
Phil, according to everything that you've said so far, the federal government did not intervene
They he federalized the National Guard and put them around the buildings.
to protect federal buildings.
And now they right without
But as you said, they didn't
without
engage with the
any
rioters.
coordinate without any coordination
Hmm.
from the people in Los Angeles
Do you think it's
who are
possible?
responsible for protecting the streets.
Do you think it's possible that that Donald Trump thought, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and put these National Guard in here around these federal buildings because the federal buildings have received threats, meaningful threats over social media. So we're going to put these guys in here around these buildings to prevent people from attacking the buildings. And for really no other reason, they didn't do anything else except that. That you don't think that that's
I
a.
think Donald Trump uses them as prop. Here's what a
Mhm.
responsible leader would have done. And this is why this is the only time, other than
Mhm.
those civil rights examples, at least in the modern era, that a president has federalized troops over the objection of a governor.
Mhm.
The answer to my question that you wouldn't answer is that you let local law enforcement handle law enforcement within the city.
Mhm.
That's what you do. So the chief of police working with the CHP, working with the Los Angeles sheriffs, they're the lead agency. They're the ones who should be handling it. If
Mhm.
they need additional help, then they go to the governor and they say, hey, look, we need additional help. And the governor does it. That's the way our Constitution works. That's the way our system works. And people who respect the Constitution understand that. What Donald
I
Trump did was he mobilized them as a show of force because for him, this is about appearing to be a strong man.
well,
That's why
it certainly
that's
seems that the show
that's
of
why the
force.
Marines were mobilized as well.
Okay, but they're not deployed.
They're apparently on the way.
But they're not deployed.
Well, they ordered them to
I
come to Los
understand.
Angeles.
I understand what it
Okay.
means to put them in motion, but they haven't been deployed. So what he did
And then
do,
are you, what's your story going to be if they are deployed,
I,
Jubal?
I don't think they will
Are
be,
you going to
but
make excuses the same way you're making excuses for Donald Trump,
is it really an
ignoring
excuse?
ignoring what local law enforcement wants?
I
Yes, it
don't.
is making excuses. It
Here's the
is
thing.
making.
Here's the thing. If it was just a show of force, if that's all that it was, it seems that it was an effective show of force because the federal buildings were not attacked.
No, no.
There were
First of
no.
all, we
Hang
don't
on,
know.
hang on. You've been talking. Let me talk for just a second. The buildings were not attacked. The National Guard did not engage, to my knowledge, with any rioters. They didn't engage in any police actions. They basically were just set up as, human shields, right? They
We
were out
don't
there.
know.
Am
We
I
don't
wrong?
know.
Am I wrong?
You maybe. We don't know what the effect of having the National Guard there
It
was,
seems to be that it
because
was
really,
preventative.
because the possibility is, because this is something that's happened over time with police agencies becoming more militarized, it is often the case that a more militarized response generates more hostility.
Is the
So
riot still going on?
it may very well be that law enforcement didn't want the National Guard to be mobilized and be present on the streets for fear that that was going to create more agitation. People were already worried
Did
about
it?
what was going on. We don't know. We don't
Is the
know.
riot still happening?
No, I mean the riot was really small,
Mhm.
so it's still
So
confined.
it's
But I
over
think
with. It's done with.
I don't know that it's done with, and we're going to have to see what happens tomorrow.
Mhm.
Right, June 14th is going to be the No Kings thing while Trump is doing his Kim Jong Un parade thing. So
Mhm.
I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We'll have to see what's going to happen. So I can't
Okay.
predict. A lot of people are going to be out on the streets, and so the potential for problems is always there. And then there are
Yeah.
agitators who look for any excuse to engage in lawlessness, and so
That is something that I've wanted to
are
talk
there.
to you about because it does seem like um, that for the most part, most of the damage that's done in these riots, and that has been done over the last number of years, going back to the George Floyd riots, is done by a small group of people that appear to be invested in agitating.
Yeah,
Right?
because
Is
there's
that your take as well?
yeah, like I mean, I've heard them described in different ways, but like the sort of the general description used seems to be anarchist. Chief McDonald was talking
Right.
about
So if you've got people that are
that
marching,
they show up.
right.
They
You've
show
got
up.
people
The
that are
same people
marching,
show
you
up.
got people that are holding signs, you got people that are out there supporting a cause that they believe in. That is um, protected and laudable, I think. If you believe in something enough to go out and actually make your voice heard, I think that that's a powerful statement for whatever that is, right? But as soon as you pick up a Molotov,
That's not
as soon as you hurl a rock at a cop, you're not a protester anymore. Now you're an agitator, right? And I feel
yeah. I
like
mean, it's worse. I mean, not just an agitator. Now you're. I mean, obviously, until you're convicted, you're not a
right,
criminal, but you should be arrested.
sure,
And that's
100%.
true whether you're hitting cops or cop cars
Hmm.
or um, burning down buildings. But it's always important, and this is back to what I was saying before, and the police are mindful of this, and McDonald was mindful of this. It's always important for the police to be proportionate in their response.
Sure.
Sometimes an over response, more militarized response, can actually make things worse. And so police, I don't envy their job, are always calibrating the balance between those two things. An
Hmm.
over response that can make things worse, and
Do
a
you think
lack of
do you think it's
response.
also possible for an under response to make things worse?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I think a lack of a response can also egg people on as well. So
Hmm.
that's the balance.
Right.
That's why, that's exactly back to my initial point, why you let local law enforcement that understand the area, that understand the threats, that are on the ground, that's why you let them make the decisions. Now,
Hmm.
if they call in and they say, hey, Mr. President, I need your help, then send in the troops, you know,
Hmm.
but you let local officials make the decisions first,
Hmm.
unless you have another goal. Now, by the way, anybody,
So
I was hearing on social media, some people were saying um, that there were people in the among the rioters who were actually Trump supporters and trying to egg them on. There's zero evidence of that.
Mhm.
And any for those of you who are like entertaining those ideas, just keep in mind that on January 6th, that's what Donald Trump said was going on. Uh, the people who attacked the Capitol, he said it was Antifa. Right? There's this tendency to sort of want to justify what's going on and come up with some plausible
No, no,
explanation.
I think it was the January 6th, as far as the violence is concerned, that was
No,
all
I know you. I wasn't saying that
agitators.
you.
Like that was the
I
Proud
wasn't.
Boys, the Oath Keepers, right? Those are
Yeah, I wasn't
they're
saying that you. I wasn't saying that you were saying
right,
that. I
right.
just
So
noticed on my social media feed
I think it's the
that
same
people started
problem.
entertaining these conspiracy theories.
I think it's the same problem. You had this, you had agitators, professional agitators, or committed agitators, like the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, who wanted to escalate the conflict, which is the same thing here. You have a small number among a large group of protesters, relatively large group of protesters. You have a very small number that are actively invested in creating a scene, right, and creating a violent conflict.
Right.
And so it's a problem on both sides. This isn't something that's limited to one side or the other.
Correct.
And I think that we
The,
need
the
to
the
have.
difference being Jubal,
Mhm.
that the people, the agitators, I don't want to call them the protesters because, like we're saying, protesting
Right.
is a time honored tradition. So
Agitators,
let's
call them
call them
agitators.
agitators. Okay, the agitators, right? Gavin Newsom will not, I guarantee you, Gavin Newsom will not pardon them.
Good,
Right.
good.
Donald Trump pardoned the attackers on January 6th. The people who attacked the police,
That's a bigger story than the way that you're making it right now, and you know it. So I
pardon
don't
me?
want to, that's a bigger story than what you're saying right now.
No, 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 no. It's not. It's the
We've
story that
talked about it
needs to
before.
be told.
People can go back and they can listen to our analysis of the
Right. No,
January
you
6th.
actually said that you thought that the pardoning of people.
I didn't agree with it. There were 69
Okay,
known
hold on.
agitators. Yep.
Edit this out.
Okay.
He
Edit this
just
out. All right, we're back. We cut that out. That was Phil having a conversation with his daughter.
yes.
So let me try this. Let me say that that Phil and I are in agreement that protesting is not just a right, that it's something that can be really important, right? If it's something that you support, if it's an issue that you support, going out and making your voice heard is something that is a good thing to do in a democracy. What is not okay is when you start committing acts of violence. And I think that there are people on both sides who are committed to that, who really believe that engaging in violence is good for their cause. And I think that Phil and I both really, really disagree with that, right? So everything short of violence, if you're throwing a rock at a cop car, you're doing it wrong. If you're lighting anything on fire, you're doing it wrong. And all that does is make your opponent's case better when you do that, right? So that's my take. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And the one thing I would say for people who protest, oftentimes if you're out there protesting because you're concerned about democracy, if you're out there concerned about the ICE raids and the inhumanity of what's going on, when you engage in violence, you become the story,
Mhm.
and the focus is off of that thing that you're presumably concerned about. You're not being an ally to the people you're concerned when you make yourself the story. It's just it's wrong. Cops aren't our enemies, right? Not that I agree with everything every cop does. They're not our enemies. And don't selectively make them their enemies. You can't be supportive of the cops on January 6th, but then not support the cops when they're out on the streets in Los Angeles trying to protect people and protect property.
Mhm.
So don't be selective in the way you do it.
I think that's a good way of putting it, actually. So
Right.
this is obviously we're going to revisit both of these issues: the riot in Los Angeles. We're going to look at again, and we're going to be talking more about the Israeli-Iran conflict as time goes on. But for now, I think that's a wrap for today. Thanks for joining us, everybody, and we'll catch you on the flip side.